This game is so adorable. You told me that I would love it, and you were right. Thematically, there is a civilization of forest creatures living under the shelter of the Evertree. You and your opponents throughout the game are collecting resources in an attempt to build the best city in all of Everdell. The theme and artwork itself was enough to sell me on this game just because it looks so stunning on the board and it's adorable. However, the gameplay itself, which I guess for a lot of people would be the most important thing, was pretty solid too. The game is a worker placement game that is influenced by the seasons. The first season is the winter season. In this season, you have 2 workers to help you gather resources. These resources help you build cards, which are either critters or constructions. You can have up to 15 cards in your city at any given time. The available resources are twigs, resin, stones, and berries. A card will show its cost and resources on the upper left side. Side note to this, the resources, like the components that make up the resources themselves, are very high quality and are very satisfying to gather and feel. On your turn, you can perform one of 3 actions. You can place a worker, you can place a card, buying it either from your personal hand or from the meadow. Or if you cannot do anything else or you don't want to, you can prepare for season. Each new season brings more workers that you can use and a benefit that is depicted on the Evertree. Points are earned by cards you draft, events you complete, and abilities that cards or events may have. There are 5 different, besides the cards being either critters or constructions, there are 5 different types of cards, that could be either one, that you'll find in this deck that will help the strategy of the game. The first one are Tan Traveler cards. These are cards that have something that activates once immediately and does not activate ever again during the game. There are also green production cards. These cards activate immediately like the Tan Traveler cards, but will activate 2 more times throughout the game, potentially at the start of 2 different seasons. The third type of card is a red destination card. These cards have locations that workers can visit and give like another action that they can do. Blue governance cards include bonuses for playing certain types of cards, or they might also provide a discount for playing different types of cards, so they get activated throughout the game multiple times as the condition on the card is satisfied. And then the last type of card that adds to the strategy of this game are the purple prosperity cards. These cards will not only just usually have normal point values that most cards have, but the card also gives you another way to earn additional points, hence the word prosperity. As a side note, in case you were curious, these card types align with the basic event tokens that you can get throughout the game. For example, on this one, if you have 3 red destination cards, you can complete the Grand Tour. In addition to the basic events that have to do with collecting different types of card, there are also special events that occur from game to game. After you've completed all actions that you wish or can complete in all seasons, then everyone looks at their respective cities and counts up the points that they have at the end of the game. The person with the most points is crowned the winner. With this, the game actually has like this cute little victory card that's kind of like supposed to make you want to post it on social media, but it is kind of satisfying to win the game, grab the card, and boast that your city is the greatest in all of Everdell. By now, it should probably be pretty clear that I love the theme and the components of the game. I love games that are meant to be adorable and designed for adults to be mid or high difficulty. I definitely say this is like a midway game, but just it's beautiful, the components are really high quality, and it's adorable. So when you look for a board game, you look for adorableness, this is definitely near the top of my list for that. I will say one potential downside to you for this is the setup for the game is beautiful, but it's really only purely aesthetic. There isn't really a practical gameplay reason for why we have the board set up this way. It's just beautiful. So with this too, with the big giant Evertree, if you're playing with 2 or 3 people, it's going to be fun and you'll orient yourself around the board well. If you are playing this with the full 4 players, the tree might get in the way, so you might have to orient the 4 of you like around the board in an unusual way so that no one like is stuck looking over the Evertree. So very beautiful, very aesthetic, but not necessarily practical with the gameplay or really involved with the gameplay. You do have to set up and take down the Evertree every single time you play, but the game does come with instructions on how to build the Evertree if that at all is difficult for you. If aesthetics of a board game to you doesn't really matter and you're not really concerned about that aspect at all, it might feel like a little bit of a hassle after a while, because really the beautifulness of the board isn't practical, but really just to be beautiful. Even though if you're not just into board games for how pretty they can be or the artwork, you will find this game a solid game. I will say that I do find Everdell, for the type of game it is, fairly replayable, because there's several decks of cards that you only take like 3 or 4 from each game, and each game will be different. You'll have different moves you can take on the board. And the deck itself, for the normal cards that you'll draft and have in your hand, is huge. So I have not yet gone through the entire deck in one gameplay, which means that it does have this different thing from game to game when you're looking for cards that might not ever come up because maybe they're bottom of the deck and you're never going to get to those. So you are kind of going with different combinations and different strategies every game just because of how many cards there are, how many things that switch out every game. So it's not going to feel the same every single time you play. And with that, the 5 types of cards that I mentioned that there are in this game give you so many different strategies. I've seen people who try to get the green production cards that trigger a couple times at the beginning of seasons, just get them en masse and have like this big mass effect that happens every season starts. I've seen people just try to build up their town by going through those blue governance cards that trigger again and again and again. And because there's so many different types of cards, there are so many different types of strategies you can go through with your city, and you can kind of see everyone might be doing something a little bit different. And the way that you play the game, the strategy you choose based off the cards you draft, will also change from game to game if you want to try a different strategy every time. One thing I love about this is some games like this, you can accomplish like everything you set your mind out to and just acquire everything and have something crazy stack up. In this game, there is definitely more on the board than you can ever imagine to accomplish in one game. So you're picking and choosing and being a little bit picky about what you do, and just thinking of a specific strategy because there's way more available than you'll actually get to do. It's not like you're going to see a player get all of the events and just completely obliterate and destroy everything. No, everyone kind of has to pick and choose because there's way more on the board than anyone can actually hope to accomplish. One thing that I think is a huge strength for this game that I was not sure about at first was how long it takes, the timing of the game. At first, when you're in winter season and you only have 2 workers and then that's kind of the end of the season, you feel like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a short game. But then as the seasons continue and you get more workers and you start using more of your cards, it doesn't actually end up being as short as you think it will be when you first start playing the game for the first time. But at the same time, it does not overstay its welcome. It ramps up perfectly. You're finished with the entire game in less than an hour, and for this type of game, I think that is perfect, but it doesn't last like 20 minutes either, like you think it's going to at the beginning of the game when everything is just going so fast. It ramps up so that you have time to build something up and go with the strategy, but not too much time to make it too crazy. So it wraps up really nicely, and I think the timing of this game, with the seasons and with everything that happens, is actually a huge strength for it. One downside I will say about Everdell is it was a tiny bit confusing to learn, and it's not that it's a super heavy game or a super difficult game, but usually I can read through a rule book and understand the game like the back of my hand. And with Everdell, after reading through the entire rule book, I still had a couple questions and a little bit of like unsure about a couple things. The definition of some of the words they use on cards is a little bit different than the way those definitions are used on other games. So you will have a tiny bit of a learning curve, a little bit larger than it should be for a game of this weight. So I would recommend probably either watching a video or maybe being taught it by someone. If you do read it from the rulebook, it will be okay, but you'll have to put in a little bit extra effort. It could be a little bit improved. However, it does have a wonderful index of all of the cards, so it does have the resources you'll need during the game, but you might have to refer back to the rulebook several times. Overall, I think this is a great game, and it's a great mid-weight game to add to my collection, and it's just like I said, number one thing I love about this, it is so adorable. If you are interested in getting Everdell after this video, I do have a link down in my description where you can check it out. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to my first 2 patrons, Peter and Brian, and have a great day.